Oh, ladies and gentlemen, please, please, please. We have a problem. We have a problem. There are 5 cars parked next door, and they're keeping it very shortly. The children won't be able to be picked up by their parents. So I've got some of the transgressor number plates here. HBC 977. HBC 977. GTH 299. And Mayflower, Mayflr. So we won't look, no one will boo you. And I promise we'll retain your seats. If anyone tries to take that seat, they'll have me and Winston to answer to. And yeah, so we got one. There's HBC 977, GTH 299, and Mayflower, Mayflr. Is that Tony? What to start? Right. Oh yeah. Ooh. Shit, Rob, we're well. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to start. Please just chill. Yeah. So just let me see where I am. Right. Our second speaker, ladies and gentlemen, you have a very good idea who he is, but he has a prodigious pedigree in politics, starting in 1976 as a Member of Parliament. Twice he's been the Minister of Foreign Affairs and twice the Deputy Prime Minister. He's also been acting Prime Minister. In 1993 he founded the New Zealand First Party, and in 1994 he had the fortitude, some people say guts, to bring to Parliament evidence that became the Winebox inquiry into alleged impropriety by the Serious Fraud Office and the IRD. Subsequent to all this, changes to tax laws were made and new rules relating to disclosure to the IRD and penalties for non-compliance were introduced. So with some people, he was not popular. More recently, he's been the handbrake on our runaway 2017 to 220 government. An ex-Howickian, ladies and gentlemen, the perennial leader of the New Zealand First Party. A round of applause, please, for Mr. Winston Peters. Welcome, Winston.
Thanks very much. I was trying to break up with the leg curtain was down there.
No, this is it. That's an altar.
Fantastic, yeah. Thank you very much. It's Peter, isn't it? It's Peter, isn't it?
Peter, yeah.
Yes, good.
And water if you want.
Thank you. You're right. Thank you, Peter, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you here today and in your busy lives, taking the time to come out. 45 years ago in Howick, often described, as we all know, as racist and where few Maori lived because it had been a fencible settlement at the time of the Anglo-Maori Wars, this town chose someone with a Maori background to be their MP. That was all the evidence that one needs to know that Howick was not racist then, and it's not now. So it's great to be back in Howick, and where this town gave a chance for a young New Zealander to start an early political career and a legal practice. Nobody's perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, it's fashionable for political parties to deliver a New Year State of the Nation address. Other parties, as you know, have already done so, which is surprising because any analysis of any value of the true state of our economy wasn't known until last week, the 15th of March, when the latest measurement of our economy was announced. But they went ahead and said what they thought anyway. The alarming news is that New Zealand's GDP in the last measured quarter declined by 0.6%. That means our economy is not growing, but shrinking. And the stark fact sits alongside the worst balance of payments figures since 1989. And there are a number of people in this room who can't remember that because they weren't alive. We'd love to say present company, but some facts that have got to remain. It means we are spending far more than we are earning. In short, the most dangerous outcome of our economy and country in 34 years. We're living beyond our means while we're going backwards. And it's time for contemplation. Never can one remember a time when things are failing everywhere, all at once, and people know things aren't working. So it's time to contemplate how exactly we got into this predicament and what we all need to do about it. New Zealand, as we all know, and it's not a political statement, it's honestly in a perilous economic state. But it didn't just happen overnight. And we have reached an inflection point. It's now or never to get it right. What we decide to do together now will determine whether we go on declining or put things right again, with policies of common sense and certainty to take us back to the top of the first world where we once were in the lifetime of so many people in this room this afternoon. You've seen us when we're at our best. There was a time in politics when politicians took the view that my party, when it's right, should be kept right, and when it's wrong, it should be put right. Today, there's an awful tribalism in New Zealand politics, ignoring realities, replacing them with politically extremist ideologies, where a political party comes first and country a poor second. You've just seen a party change its leader, all planned late last year, foisted upon you as being a surprise, because the tanks run out, we're told.
They kicked her out.
Well, can you imagine Helen Clark saying the tanks run out? Or Peter Fraser saying the tanks run out? No. But the mainstream media accepted it, when clearly it was designed and planned, and some of us said it last year. But then what would we know about politics? It is amazing. There's an awful tribalism. In the living memory of people here, there have been successful Labour and national governments. Be honest, there have been. Re-elected election after election because those leaders put the people first and not their obsession with political power, and that is something we have got to do again. Today, sadly, too much that is Labour and national is just the same. We know it. Remember, there was a housing crisis under the last national government. It's worse today. There was an educational crisis under the last national government. It's worse today. There was a law and order crisis under the last national government. It's worse today. They were catching and warning. Today, it's a fishing policy, catch and release. What'll be laughable, but it's so sad. But that's what Judith was doing, catch and warn, and now it's catch and release. And you're paying the price for it. There was a cost of living crisis under the national government. It's sadly worse today. And yet there are people campaigning for this election with one naked policy, and you've all heard it. It's our turn now. And I bet you're asking yourself this question. Your turn? To do exactly what? When? And how? Surely you deserve to hear an answer to that statement. It's our turn now. Turn now to do what? Well, I hope not. This is about an inflection point in our history. We've been here before. A man said in 1893, New Zealand is God's own. And everybody forgot the second thing he said. He said, New Zealand's God's own, but the devil's own mess. And he set out to change it way back in 1893 by first giving women the vote. His name was Seddon. And we became a transformative government back then, and it was massive, the changes that were made. And then we saw in the 30s, late 30s and the 40s and the 50s, National and Labour and then National actually taking us to the top of the world. We've been there before. We're not dreaming when we demand to go back there again. This election must be about the New Zealand people. Whatever our background, whatever our race, our religion or creed, for if we don't work together, if we continue these numerous divisions, there will be doomed, our people, a repeat of the same failures of the last few years. You see, the mass majority of New Zealanders are, and don't rush and complain about this statement, but it's about humanity. The mass majority of New Zealanders are conservatives with a sense of humanity. We believe in giving our neighbours a helping hand when that neighbour's in trouble. We want our hard-earned taxes spent on those issues which, as a mass majority, we believe in. Now, during Cyclone Gabriel, despite bureaucratic failure everywhere, we saw so many people working together to address the crisis right there, right now. They put aside their differences and focused instead on their shared humanity and shared goal, with many putting their lives at risk as well. And today's politicians must surely learn from that exercise and that example. Get out and talk to New Zealanders all over the country and hear their concerns. Listen to ordinary Kiwis alarmed at what is happening to New Zealand, our country. And stop listening to the PR merchants and the spin merchants and the puffery merchants who think it's all about the latest polls. You'll decide this the next election. In those seconds in that polling booth, you better make sure you become the master again. Because guess what? Politicians might hate it, but you are. But don't waste the chance. Make sure your vote counts. Listen to ordinary New Zealanders. You know, we're proud of our distinctive identity and culture and the cities and towns and villages we live in. And we know that with the right management and working together, we can do the impossible. It was amazing at the last Women's Rugby World Cup when, by good management, they put together a team of women players, Pacific, Mara and European, even had male and female coaches, and achieved the impossible. But they only got there by a proper analysis of how serious their crisis looked when they were facing that challenge. It was serious, but it wasn't hopeless. And they imaged cooperation, conciliation, inclusivity and teamwork. And over 90 minutes at Eden Park, in November last year, they shocked the cynics and they moved their sport ahead decades in just 90 minutes. And that's what our country needs now. A proper analysis of how serious our cause looks. And today, ladies and gentlemen, have a look at the daily headlines, if you can stomach them and if you can believe them. And whilst doing that, remember that politicians are not your masters, they are your servants. And scanning the headlines today, we are bedeviled by a number of truths, and they are truths. Our country is facing the highest cost of living increases in the last 34 years. Inflation is continuing to climb, and we are facing a recession, and many countries are doing far better than New Zealand. All costs are going skyward. You know it. Food, rates, power, diesel, petrol, rents, mortgages, school fees, insurance, university fees, healthcare, all basic costs going skyward. And what's the response from Wellington? No inquiry into bank charges, benefiting foreign banks? Why not? They've had 5 inquiries in Canberra into their own banks, but none here into Aussie banks. What's wrong with this scene? No inquiry into supermarket costs? Why not? No inquiry into energy costs? No action from Wellington? Just more promises and more borrow and spend. And the real crunch is coming for you, the workers, you middle income earners, and the seniors who now have so little, if any, disposable income. You know, governments have a record of particularly going after seniors. And that's exactly what every political party in Parliament is planning to do. If you don't believe me, Labor, Greens, National and ACT all believe in increasing the retirement age. They clearly have not done enough physical work, because for some people, 40 years in the physical jobs is just too much. They don't seem to understand that. Maybe they think that manual labor is the Prime Minister of Mexico. Well, it sounds like it. And why do I say that? I say it because over the history, and many here remember it, there's been only one party that's always defended and fought for seniors. And we have never supported a change to the retirement age, or attacking your incomes, or your super, and that commitment has never changed. And under New Zealand First, the superannuation age will not change. Now, tell them I'm not talking, I'm talking to you. You remember the past? Numerous attacks. Labor first, then National, they all agreed. Only one party, when its leader was much younger, ever defended you. Because we believe that great societies have these features. In particular, they look after their young and their old. That's what great democracies and great societies and great economies do. And we need to go on doing that in our future. They'll be coming around to see you in the next few months and making you all sorts of promises, but the good book says, by their deeds you will know them. Don't forget. Look at the record. You know, in education, our country was once a world leader. Phenomenal, really, when you think about it. Way out in the South Pacific. Long way, 12,000 miles from its markets, leading the world when it comes to education. We now see our literacy and numeracy rates continue to decline in core subjects, and a continued fall in student achievement over the past 2 decades. The past 2 decades. We have stopped focusing on reading, writing and arithmetic, and now teach a range of sociological values to the alarm of so many parents. Parents who know that achievement at the start of a child's life, their child's life, in reading and maths is essential for fulfillment in their later life, for academic success, for upward mobility, for economic success, and indeed in being able to participate in their society. And the failure in the past 20 years is not just the lowest decile schools, but it's now also in the highest decile schools. And what does that mean? Well, our system of education has been the victim of numerous virtue-signalling tinkerers who have never been challenged. And they would now rather teach a young child virtuous self-identity theory, whatever that might mean, than basic maths and English. Our education system should be fundamentally focused on education, not using our children in some sort of woke social re-engineering program for vulnerable, underdeveloped minds. And here's the point. And when were they allowed to decide that parents' views don't matter? When did they ever ask you When did they ever think that you who are paying for all this needed to be consulted and asked as to what you thought? With truancy levels running, this is staggering. And people in this room know what the rules used to be like. With truancy levels running at over 60% in many schools. Not 5% or 10%, no, 60%. It's clear there is no plan to fully train our young human capital. Some of us went to country Maori schools. You didn't turn up, you better have a notice the next day. You have to have an excuse. No more, where's Charlie, we don't care. No. We had to turn up. Ladies and gentlemen, attending school has been compulsory since, get the century right, 1877. When a whole lot of people in Parliament without education thought it was critical to train people. So they said you must go to school. 146 years later, what does this government think taxpayers-funded education is for? A child not at school is a child not learning. Preschools, primary, intermediate, secondary, tech institutions and universities, now all in serious trouble. Why it's important? Because it's our human capital, and how they're trained will determine how good our economy will be into the future. You know, all of us have had to seek work. Well, ever since Adam went and ate that thing that Eve gave him, we've had to work. Yet New Zealand's labour market is a mess today. In just a few years, this Labour government has allowed 50,000 more New Zealanders to depend on the job seeker benefit. 50,000 more to depend on the job seeker benefit. This at a time when employers are screaming out for workers. The government then has just linked benefit increases to inflation. A virtual pay rise every year. Now, let me ask you, when was the last time you got a yearly inflation pay rise in your income or your salary? The problem isn't the level of the benefit, it's the length of time spent on it and the lack of incentive to get off it. Yes, we need to give a hand up in people's time of need, but not create a handout that some choose as an easy long-term lifestyle. The fact is the job seeker benefit list is now loaded with school leavers with low levels of education and no work experience. This means, you know, we just aren't understanding how serious the long-term drain on us and our economy will be if we don't turn this around real fast. It means, like Germany and Taiwan, we need to seriously help the young seeking apprenticeships and help the businesses who provide them, thereby providing more work opportunities in training, backed up by sanctions on those who can train and work but choose not to. Our country, as I said, was once in the first 3 in the world. It's probably why people used to get off a boat in the old days, and the first thing they'd be asked, or a plane in the 60s and 70s, the first thing they'd be asked is, what do you think of New Zealand? They hadn't been here 5 minutes, they'd be asked, what do you think of New Zealand? Because quietly we were proud of it. We knew that we were number 1, virtually. For example, the Minister of Labour used to know every unemployed person by name on the register. Not because he had an elephantine memory, but because they were only 29. Not 1,000 or 100, just 29. Don't tell me we can't do it again. Whether you trust the daily headlines or not, the picture in so many areas of our society is a bleak one. Take our health system. We are once again a proud world leader, but cracks are now emerging everywhere. Almost 70,000 New Zealanders have been waiting 4 months for treatment, or worse still, to get their first specialist appointment to have their condition examined. And every day the waiting list is expanding with fewer elective surgeries than before the arrival of COVID. People seeking orthopaedic care, for example, hip, knee replacements, shoulder surgery, amount to 1 in 4 patients waiting more than 4 months. How many times have you been told by politicians that we've addressed that we've fixed it? Emergency departments are under siege with big gaps in critical staff, and for many patients, the choice is dismal. As one specialist said, the choice is between, quotes, who has the worst cancer and who won't survive until next week without intervention, inner quotes. Plenty of people are dying because they can't get timely treatment, but would survive if they did. And just yesterday we learnt that our immigration bureaucracy, despite spending millions, has only secured 19 visas for overseas nurses. That's about 400 million per nurse. All the while, hundreds of Kiwi nurses, doctors and midwives have been unjustifiably and unconstitutionally mandated out of a job. And before some of those naysayers and liars get out there, I'm vaxxed 3 times. But I believe in the right of people to be told of its possible damage or consequences, and for people to have the right to decide themselves. You know, we can have 50,000 people shoulder to shoulder in a stadium, but we still have desperately needed workers mandated out of their jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, how mindlessly arrogant are these people in Wellington destroying lives, workers' lives, in this way? Under New Zealand First, these mandates, which we believe are unconstitutional, will end. And you know, when it comes to operations, to deceive the public, the politicians have set the thresholds for treatment too high. So demand already at crisis point by these high thresholds is seriously understated. And it's all been done on purpose. You know how it goes? Well, if we haven't analysed their problem, we won't have to treat them, will we? If we haven't analysed their problem, we won't have to treat them, will we? Does that sound like a public health system to you? No, it's not. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a criticism of the hard-working doctors and nurses and medical staff. On the contrary, they deserve our full gratitude. And as we look at all the issues facing our country right here, right now, the crisis in health, you won't be seen in the polls, but the crisis in health is our biggest one. You can fix a lot of things up in time, but when people stand to die if they don't get treatment, you cannot fix it up unless you get the treatment right here, right now. It is our biggest crisis. This crisis in health must be addressed in Budget 2023, starting with a name for the health service that 95% of New Zealanders can understand. Not te whatu ora. Everybody knows that language and communication is about understanding, but these people don't care. They've got waka kotai heading down the road. It's meant to be out in the water. Get on Air New Zealand. They've got the waka in the sky. Why are we putting up with this bull dust? It's your country. Take it back. Under New Zealand First, we will change all the woke virtue signalling names of every government department back to English. Back to what they were before the academics from university sociology departments started this madness a few years ago. And it's not an attack on the Maori language. I was here when the first funding for Maori language ever started in my political career, and I'm proud of it. But it's an attack on the elite virtue signalers who have hijacked the language for their own socialist means. This conceited, conniving cultural cabal doesn't represent hard-working ordinary Maori. They only seek to use Maori to further their own agenda. and some Maori secretly driving this agenda are of the people, but they're not for the people. They're of the people, but they're not for the people. Do you see them going on about housing, education, elevators for Maori, or health, or first world wages? Oh no, not that. That's what Maori need, and that's what the whole world needs. No, they're always obsessed with these things. They use their people. And in addition, under New Zealand First, we will meet St John's funding demands. We'll ensure Plunkett is funded to do their job properly. We will fund Mike King's Gumboot Friday charity. We won't be spending... We won't, like Labor, spend $1.9 billion on mental health and end up with 5 beds, which is what they did. We'll ensure rescue helicopters and surf life saving New Zealand are properly funded. We'll ensure Pharmac has more funds to get their medication to the people that need it most. But the first thing we are going to do is sort out Pharmac itself. We're going to concentrate on performance, not puffery. That's what we should be investing in as a country. Not Auckland Harbour Bridge cycleways, $29 billion on Auckland light rail, and countless other cultural virtue signal madness. We say that the first responsibility of any New Zealand politician is the safety and security of New Zealanders in their homes and in their streets. You know, the last week the Labour Party appointed its 5th Minister of Police in 3 years. 5th in 3 years. She began, the new minister, by saying, quotes, "Government must do better on retail crime and repeat offending." Wow. And she was saying that to a glum-looking former Minister of Police, Mr. Hipkins. You've got to see the photograph. But in a moment of honesty, she admitted what we all know. Labor is soft on crime. And it might sound dated, but the present crime stats are undeniable. Total crime is up 33%. Violent offending is up 42%. Sexual offending is up 16%. Theft offences up 49%. Ram raids, mostly committed by youth, were up last year by 465%. She calls that retail crime. See how you get away with it? Doesn't sound so bad when you say retail crime. Most of the people are saying, what would that possibly be? It's an example of it. What has Labor done to law and order? We didn't secure, in 2017, 2,238 extra trained frontline police. Between that time, 17 to 2020, New Zealand First didn't secure all those new policemen and women for this outcome. And under New Zealand First, if you commit a crime and are part of a gang, it will be law that it is an automatic aggravating factor in your sentencing. In addition, if you assault a first responder, police officer, paramedic, firefighter or corrections officer, in the course of their duty, there will be an automatic 6-month minimum mandatory prison sentence. We will no longer allow gangs to run amok on our streets like they are doing and have been allowed to do these past few years. And if you know anything about the Maori world, every time something like that appears, because the propensity of gangs to be Maori appears on the 6 o'clock news, the people are ashamed of it. And we need to do something about it. You know, Cyclone Gabriel showed just how dependent we are on electricity. Not just on cooperation, but on electricity. Today, our electricity is 55% hydro, 80% geothermal, 10% natural gas. Wind power provides 6%, and solar power is 1%. And Labor and the Greens have been using inferior imported coal from Indonesia to generate electricity as well. Ladies and gentlemen, some policies about energy and our future set against the facts of our supply chain above are simply alarming. You're hearing all sorts of rhetoric from politicians about their plans for future energy when we already have, if managed properly, the chance to create energy that is affordable, reliable and sustainable, and at a lower cost to our households, businesses and to our economy. We've got the mix there already. In New Zealand, though, they don't seem to understand, in some of their comments, that it doesn't always rain. The sun doesn't always shine. And often there is no wind. So some suggestions from some politicians have no connection with the facts, past, present, or future, or the weather itself. They rule out natural gas when it's so important when water, sun, and wind are not present. And if inferior coal with higher carbon emissions from than natural gas is the Labour Green answer, then they are in la-la land. New Zealand will need more energy to rebuild our economy and our lifestyles. That will require common sense planning and policies proven to have worked alongside necessary new investment. The last thing we will need, though, is politicians waving their hands around, claiming the sky has fallen in, whilst arguing for grandiose plans that will see us all go broke. Question: would you rather the Greens go and spend 16 billion plus of your money on carbon credits in offshore economies? Or would you rather you spend that 16 billion on your children, your schools, your hospitals and infrastructure that we need now? Ladies and gentlemen, that's a brief snapshot of where sadly New Zealand is in 2023. It means we have some real problems to address right here and right now. Problems so fundamental to our future that they can't be ignored beyond this year. And a lolly-scrambled budget that ignores these critical issues will be just disastrous. Why do people who do the household budget know this? Down there with all those PR officers and advisors and lobbyists, they don't seem to understand the most rudimentary thing of home economics. But having said all that, something more serious has emerged in political and public life that the mass majority of New Zealanders never asked for, don't want and don't need. What happened to one country, one people? Some of us are Maori and Scottish. There's nobody perfect. Gives you a natural suntan and a desire to save money. Or as Billy T. James used to say, but he couldn't say it now, could he? The world is so woke. He said one half of you wants to get drunk and the other half doesn't want to pay for it. We haven't got a sense of humour anymore. You're not allowed that either, you know. What happened to one country, one people? A new blight on our society is a serious diversion from what New Zealanders of all backgrounds, races and beliefs really need. An obsession of an elite few seeking to tear down the very fabric of our society. It concerns the insidious attempts to change this country's culture and institutions. In short, to remove from us the inheritance that our parents and our parents before them, in difficult times, left for us. It concerns political engineers who, without any authority, have nevertheless been given license to use your money, taxpayers' money, to indoctrinate the mass majority towards their perverse thinking. And their way of thinking is an all-out assault on Western values and on the very essence of our democracy. One person, one vote, and each vote being of equal value. There's a full-scale attack being waged on New Zealanders' culture, identity and sense of belonging. And the only way they can achieve this is by attacking the bonds that used to hold our society together and to misrepresent the facts behind our shared history. This elite, self-appointed, self-opinionated, have as their purpose the destruction of our cultural inheritance. They want to totally overhaul our system of government and values by a political fait accompli, by releasing an army of Pandoras from their box of tricks on the simple basis it's out now and you won't be able to put it back. That's what they're saying. Well, that depends what you think. It's out now and you can't change it. Their paradigm claim is that New Zealand is institutionally racist and therefore a retarded society. Why do so many people want to immigrate to this country if we're racist? See what I mean? But they say that we're institutionally racist and therefore a retarded society. This is peak madness. Today, all they speak about is rights. They never speak about personal responsibility. Never. They're all into minority rights. Teaching children gender identity theory. And they're not interested in debate. Anyone who questions them is gaslit or culturally cancelled or just shouted down. This gaslighting group is a small minority while the mass majority is meant to kowtow to them, and too many political representatives are not prepared or have the guts to stand up to them. This is a paradox in that the one of their claimed concerns is Maori, when one of the essentials of being Maori is conservatism with a capital C. It's extreme inverse racism, because what they prospect, and I hope every Maori that's watching this program understands this, it is extreme inverse racism because what they prospect for those of us who have Maori in our background is the belief that we can't be equal without first getting a hand up from them. The only way we could be equal is they've got to help us. How racist is that? And it's also the emergence of a new class of society which shuns the company of working women and men for their self-concerned solutions for working people's lives. They've got 1,000 solutions for workers, but they never want to be part of them. Most of these people have spent their lives skulking around the fringes of academia and now wish to impose their ideologies on the hard-pressed men and women of our country. Notice how the rights of family or children or women have become their obsession, and the last people they want to consult are families, women, or you. Labor may now be furiously trying to put co-governance on the back burner, but they, and sadly too many, even in National, still believe in it. The tenets of co-government are based on a massive lie. They're saying that on the 5th of February 1840, when no one in the British Empire, or indeed Britain, was in partnership with the Queen, 2 days later on the 7th of February, Maori were. Right there is the lie. The simple fact is Maori ceded sovereignty to the Crown because for years before 1840, and many of us know well about it, they wanted law and order in their country. No matter how much the cultural Marxists want to try and rewrite history. And in arguing partnership, they mean 50-50. Even though the mass majority who claim to be Maori and who claim to be speaking on behalf of all Maori are not even half Maori themselves. By the 1975 Electoral Act, and there are some people who remember that act very well, by definition of a Maori, that's half Maori or more. By that definition, they don't even amount to 6% of New Zealand's population. So who are they really representing? And which part is the real challenge? Which part of their mixed DNA is going to compensate the other part? Why don't they tell us that? Which part of their mixed DNA is going to compensate the other part? Ladies and gentlemen, why can't they answer that question? You know, New Zealand is the beneficiary of Western values, democracy and rule of law. It's also the beneficiary, thinking of it, of the enormous cooperation that has happened between Maori and Europeans. Because the funny thing is, Maori were very acquisitive. They love to see new things. We always have been. take some of them shopping. I'm not looking at anybody here. But look, we're the beneficiary of Western values, democracy and the rule of law. Of course there were things bad, but we're trying to take out the best part of it and readapt it and go forward to a greater society. And the advancement and enhancement of those principles have only occurred in those societies that have united together as one people, and who celebrate their nationhood instead of perpetuating division. With cooperation, conciliation, inclusivity and teamwork, our country can make it out of this crisis to a better future for every New Zealander. We can become again the envy of the world. This is the first of many meetings we'll be holding in campaign 2023. Remember, politicians are not meant to be your masters, they are meant to be your servants. Too much of this country is in a right mess. That's because the people who are suffering are not the ones who caused the mess. Our once great society was built on hard work and a fair go for everyone. Our once great society was built on hard work and a fair go for everyone because there were people practically in Parliament and their thinking believed that was important. So our bold steps are needed to lift our country back where it belongs. Countries that do well work as a team, and everyone has a role and a part to play. So send out a message from Howick this afternoon that is unmistakable and uncompromising, that we are aware of the plans and purposes of others, that we know of their secret agenda, that together we can and will stop them, that we will rebuild our country for the many and not the few. We will reconstruct our economy for every New Zealander, not just a few over mighty subjects. How do you know? He didn't answer it. We will reconstruct our economy for every New Zealander, not just for a few over mighty subjects. That's our vision, that's our commitment, and that is our commission: to protect and save New Zealand, to take our country back. Please join us. Thank you. Peter's asked me will I take questions, and the answer is yes, I certainly will. If we can't answer them, we'll tell you before it's patently obvious. But please, could you make them a question, because the shorter they are, the more people can ask questions.
Is this on? Okay. I have a question, Mr. Peters. If it comes to a time where you have to choose who you will go with, how will you do that if you have to go with National or Labour? Because neither of them are going to get outdoor right to actually govern us. So how will you do it?
For 30 years, that's all I've had at meetings. You know something, we live in a democracy, and my party's a democracy. It seriously believes in democracy. Ask any of my colleagues whether we make unilateral decisions like that. We consult and we decide. But we've made it very clear we're not going with any party that practice racism, that seek to divide this country, that argued for things like, hey, poor, and a whole lot of things like that. We've made it very clear. Our pathway for Maori is to take their education, their housing and their health and make it first world. That's what we were lucky enough to have when we were young, and we want our children to have it in our future. When we've talked to others, then we'll decide, because it's not about forming a government, it's about asking great questions and forming a real good government.
Kia ora, Right Honourable Sir Winston Peters. Good seeing you again, sir. Chief Forecaster Gareth Kernan says, we think the economy is already in recession at the moment. We suspect that the final quarter of 2022 will have shown negative growth. And we're expecting negative growth to pretty much continue throughout 2023 and early next year as well. My question, what can New Zealand First Party bring as a #1 solution to this great deficit problem that is affecting all New Zealanders today?
Look, that's an excellent question. And when he said that, some of us were saying last year this country is going to recession. You don't get any credit for saying it. They don't say, well, you said that. And there's nothing so antiseptic anyway as this is the statement. There's nothing so sterile as the statement, I told you so. But we darn well did. What we're going to do is ensure that we spend all money we possibly can, first of all, to keep people going, but then to rebuild our wealth, our exports, our self-reliance, when we could be using product in New Zealand rather than getting from offshore, do everything we possibly can on production and wealth creation, and not consumption. Consumption is here today, gone tomorrow. Wealth creation sits there and it'll be there in 50 years' time, still working for us. And that's our terrible failure. We're a country, you know, where a man between 1870 and 1880, I don't want to be reciting history, but he built more railways in 10 years with horse and carts than for the next 130 years. We can do it. But you've got to have leadership that's focused there and not trying to buy people off with lolly scambles. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My question is three-part, all related. And I'm just wondering about
Three questions.
what's behind the massive...
Three waters.
Sorry?
3 questions or 1 question?
It's all related, and I've asked this question to my elected MP. I live in Mount Albert. Surprise, surprise, I got gaslit. But anyway, I'm just wondering what's behind the massive increase in police helicopter activity in the last couple of years since the last August lockdown? And is the negative impact on the mental health and quality of life that we're experiencing justified by the undisclosed benefits in terms of arrests and crime prevention? And finally, is there a surveillance agenda beyond the frontline policing that we're not aware of? Because it's deafening, and on some occasions, sometimes it's impossible to sleep with the constant air surveillance. Yeah, would love some answers.
Well, the answer for more helicopters in the sky is they're chasing more crime. Now, I suspect in your question, do you think they're on a spying mission? Let me tell you, they haven't got the resources. And I'm someone who has been, we're a party that went out and got 2,238 extra police, because you cannot run a business, or you cannot be safe you can't live in your home unless you've got security. It's the #1 priority in that sense. But as for things like surveillance and travelling all hours of the day and night, I live in central Auckland. We're all the same. I can't answer that question in the way that you couch it. I'd love to. Perhaps you drop me a line. I'll go out and find the evidence that backs up what you're saying. I'd rather do that than be like some got the answers to everything. I'd rather do the inquiry. Yeah. Yes, sir. There's a gentleman over there. Yeah.
My question to you is really, for people like me, we want to understand the treaty, what the problem is. And from my point of view, I take no trouble reading that. Anybody who should read that, it's very clear from the start. It totally opposes what's happening to the Waitangi tribe. And somebody should ask the current Maori Party why they disbelieve this. This is written in 1922 by this gentleman who was highly regarded.
So look, I'm sorry, but it's question time, and I did say the length you take stops 2 or 3 other people asking their question. I don't want to knock it out. And you're right to quote that. And that's a very good treatise there that Ngata wrote. And he writes it on the question of sovereignty and being ceded as well. It's all in his works. I am a great admirer of Ngata, as my Scottish mother was, because she thought he was an intellectual genius. He also had some great tips for Maori health and food. But here's your question. Why don't you see these people campaigning for Maori housing, education standards, for Maori health access, or first world wages? You never do. You don't see them stopping work for that? No, it's all about their pet projects. Or turn it on its head. If you know you can't do a darn thing for Maori in the real area because you've got no policy, then you focus on this sort of stuff. And they're on about it every day. Now, look, yeah, I'm not asking the Maori Party at all. Because they're pretenders, mate. They've been around for a long time, they're going nowhere. Well, the Waitangi Tribal, no, stop. You're wrong. Helen Clark didn't set it up. It was set up in 1975 by Matt Rata and the then rolling government. However, it was from 75 onwards. And then, of course, the Longi Labor government took it back to the 6th of February 1840. The real point is, if you're going to go and claim that the Treaty of Waitangi, you didn't cede sovereignty, what are you doing with the Waitangi Tribunal then? It's these anomalies that they need to be attacked on, and my party spends its time trawling through the information to take these shibboleths apart. It's hard work, but I've had it clear in a long career where I stand. I've been at it for 45 years arguing this one thing. We are one country, one nation, whatever our background is. And the only chance of surviving is understanding that. And I, sir, believe that the mass majority of Maori think the same. I'm out to stop the elites, who are, as I said, of the Maori people, but they're not for the Maori people. And they're getting wealthy, and they're getting wealthy on the misery. They're getting wealthy on the misery of their people's backs. I intend to stop it, and I've never stopped.
Right, Winston, just
in case, no, you've forgotten. It was John Key that went off and signed the Indigenous...
John Key let us down in 2008.
No. 2008, I was the Foreign Minister and I didn't sign up. I stopped Helen Clark signing it up. John Key got it and he signed up in 2010.
We're running out of time. Let's be fair to the other people who want to ask a question, please. Yep.
Son? Well, sure. I'll answer the question if you can put it. I'll answer the question if you can put it with precision.
Yeah.
Tell me what you're asking.
Yeah.
Not a speech.
Are you going to address the Waitangi Tribunal?
Oh, well, when you told me that Helen Clark established it, I got somewhat diverted because she didn't. And you've got to defend things when they're wrong. The reality is that Waitangi Tribunal is now making work for itself, and that's going to stop. Well, sorry, sir, but if you'd asked me a shorter question, I might have got to it faster. Let's be fair.
Winston.
Yes.
Here, over here. Over here, Winston, the other side.
Oh, sorry.
Most of us, if not all of us in this room, probably believe that we have the worst government, socialist, arguably a new style of Marxism approaching government that we've ever had. Now, what I'm going to ask you as, and I believe you are either the elder statesman or one of the elder statesmen of New Zealand politics. If we had an election tomorrow, the polls tell us it'll be a knife edge. Winston, that tells me that half of our country, our wonderful country, where I've been here for 52 years, a wonderful country, half of the people are either morons or they are not properly educated or they don't care, but they support this government. Please.
One of the basic things I learned when I was at school was that a question's a question. And I was talking about the basics at the start of the speech.
Can you
Ask a question.
Can you advise us why it is you think that half the country still support this government?
The answer for that is, you will recall very well, the media and a lot of our critics, between 2017 and 2020, calling me and my party a handbrake. All right, we did so well that they took all the credit and they won the election all by themselves in 2020. We've only been gone 2.5 little bit years, and look what a disaster they are without experience and without a handbrake. And don't blame the public. Don't call the public morons. They've been fed a fodder from the mainstream media that is not true. Why? Because the mainstream media took a bribe of 56 million off the government. Right? They wouldn't do it when I was there because I stopped it. I know, as soon as they got them by themselves, away they go, bought the media out. So don't blame the New Zealand people. And my answer to you in the end is this. If we do not turn this around, it'll be your and my fault. Right? We're going to have hundreds of meetings like this. We intend to go out there and change this country because it's a cause that is desperately needed to be fought.
Excuse me, but I object to that. Calling 50% New Zealand morons is...
Madam, hold on. I just told them that's not the way to treat people. I agree with you. The reality is they've not been given the information. And frequently, you know, the number one ability in politics is, if you're any good, you've got to learn to ask good questions and don't stop asking them. But it's not happening. But then if you've been bought off, what do you do? And bought off they have been. But I'm told I'm meant to be smiling and look after the mainstream media in the next 6 months. It's going to be very difficult. One more question, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm here. Hi. Peter.
Sorry, yes.
Yes. I
Just
would
know this
like
lady at the back waving as well, sir.
I would like to talk about a child justice. Children today who are robbing the shops and raiding are 14 and 15-year-old. If you don't deal with them today, in 10 years' time, they will be uneducated, unqualified, hard criminals. So what would you do to deal with them today? Because today is the time when you can put them in the boarding school and force them to educate themselves, because if they are middle of the night stealing, this just means they don't go to school. So you have to do something now, not in 10 years' time, because today you have to build boarding schools. In 10 years, you will be building prisons.
Madam, you're reading my speech back to me. But I'll add one more thing. When they commit these offences and they go before the court, we're taking the parents along as well. I know. You say don't? Yes, we will. We are helping parents, we're paying benefits and everything else. I want to see who's allowing this child to do that. I want a total family solution. Not from the sociology department of York University, but from plain common sense.
I was just trying to figure out how to put this as a question, but I think our recently left Prime Minister, I don't think she said that there's nothing more in the tank. I believe she actually said there's nothing more in the bank.
Winston, one more for the lady on the back.
One of those statements, the second one is true. The first one is an excuse. Yes, madam.
Kia ora, Winston. I just want to reply to that lady that spoke about the ram raid. I said years ago, I don't know what government brought it in, but they had military training for the young ones. and they took it out. If that was still there, might not happen. Because they learn respect in military and services.
It's interesting you say that, and one of the sad things, as a lot of parents will know, that often a child in its development is at a tipping point. The right treatment now, and you get a better outcome. The wrong treatment, and sometimes it's a matter of fortune what might happen. You're quite right. We're not going to bring back compulsory military training, but I think that young people should be given options. We're going to take you away. We're going to put a lot of investment into you to try and get you right. And the Army is fascinating because the Army has done such an unbelievable job for Maori people. They go in the Army and they turn their lives around dramatically. And years ago, the head of the military in our country, General Pōnanga, asked the former Prime Minister, Rob Muldoon, he said, Prime Minister asked the head of the military, how many Maori have you got in your army? And you know what Pōnanga said to him? We have, Prime Minister, just soldiers in our army. You see the difference in the thinking? We've got to get back and think like that. But if you're talking about programs to try and turn recidivists' lives around, I think it's worth the investment. The other day, a guy got caught for committing fraud in the Westland local government. I think he stole $77,000 and he got a whole lot of years in prison. He shouldn't be going to prison. He should be out there working for the community. He's not a danger to society, and that's $130,000 going to waste on him every year. No, there's some people should be in prison who are a danger to society, and other ones should be out working, doing something. One more question.
Hi. I just wanted to know your opinion on our freedom of movement agreement with Australia. We have one of the largest diasporas in the world to Australia, and they're constantly marketing for our nurses and our construction workers to move to Australia to much better conditions. I'm curious whether or not you would ever consider changing the agreement to stop hawkish Australian companies from taking our workers from us.
Isn't it amazing? In 1976, the Prime Minister of New Zealand was asked, what are you going to do about this problem of New Zealanders going to Australia? And he said, well, it's going to raise the IQ in both countries. Do you remember that? No, you don't. But he said that. And sadly, it sounded funny, but it's not. The reality is, people would not believe in this country if we had comparative wages with Australia. The second thing is, people all forget. But it's 1984, and Roger Douglas with a man called, sorry, not Roger Douglas, David Longy and Roger Douglas started government in New Zealand about the same time as Bob Hawke and Keating were starting government in Australia. Two new governments. Hawke and Keating went down an incremental path of improvement of their economy, and we had a political revolution of neoliberalism in this country. And over the next 25 years, Australia grew in real terms 34% bigger than us. That's why our people are going to Australia, because your political leaders here have failed. Let's get it fixed. Yes, sir.
I'm a New Zealander, but I'm in Australia, and I saw you on the Carl Stefanowski morning show saying, my country needs me. And what I've heard today from you, I completely agree with that statement. But are you intending next time you go on his program to set out what you've said today to stop exactly the same co-government's problem that's happened in this country happening in Australia, because that's what the Labor government is doing over there with the voice for the Aboriginal?
You know something, just the other day, the wording on the referendum was decided in Australia. You read that?
Yes, I did.
The amazing thing about it, and one shouldn't be interfering with another country's politics, but I'd ask one question of Australia. Do you honestly think that Aboriginals have one voice? Do you honestly think that? That they would have one voice? It's like going down the South Island in Ngai Tahu and saying, you think like Ngāti Porou, don't you? Or worse still, you think like Ngāpui, don't you? They don't get it, right? And here's the tragedy, because when you go down that pathway, there'll be an elite who do very well out of it, sucking on the seat of the taxpayers' money, whilst the mass majority will have their concerns and needs utterly neglected. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry to finish on that brief, rather gloomy note, but thank you for coming out this afternoon. As I say, it's not part of my speech. It's not part of my speech, but I have a great affection for this place. As I said, I had a law practice here once, and if things were going so well, I did more and made more money in 1 month than I made for the next year in politics. And everybody thinks I'm mad for going back into it. But in the end, this country's worth fighting for, and I hope you agree.